kind of about expectations, right? Destination blindness is the term I'm kind of coining. But when you're thinking about going to the beach, or you're thinking about going to Disney, or camping into the wild, or in technology, if you open up one of your apps, you're just expecting it to work. You're thinking about the outcome. When you go to the beach, you're not thinking about how do I get to the beach. You're thinking about the great time you're going to have at the beach, and hopefully you have great weather. Or when you're going to Disney, which is my wife's favorite place, it's always about, oh, I can't wait to see the parades and eat the food. And you think about all the positive, amazing things that are going to happen once you get to where you're going. But a lot of times we don't think about the journey, and the journey is so much more complex. Like, hey, we got to figure out where we want to go to begin with. And then, are we taking the kids? Who's watching the house? Is this our budget? Where are we staying? What do we need to pack? Is this still fun? Right? At the end of the day, when you start breaking down the journey, it actually takes away from the experience, because it is usually not the fun part of the whole process. And as we look at networks, it's kind of the same today, right? We expect things just to work, but we don't think about the complexities of everything. And as Josh alluded to in kind of the intro, it's changing and morphing all the time. So as we look at modern networks today, we have a lot of gaps that we never had before. We have maybe colos that we're consuming that aren't on premise. We have workers working everywhere and anywhere. We're consuming so much more cloud resources, SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, like all of this has exploded and added so many layers of complexity that we've never dealt with before. And our users, our consumers, even ourselves don't really think much about the journey. We're just expecting that destination, and we're hoping for a positive outcome and experience. So as we take a broader picture and look at this, I'm going to step through the journey or the life of a packet. And we start obviously at the endpoint. And the endpoint has gained so much power and popularity because of things maybe like TLS 1.3, and we can't do decryption and man in the middles and whatnot. So we have to rely more on the endpoint than ever before. And I'll say, a lot of people don't think of Cisco when you hear the word endpoint. And I think that's something that we need to change. Cisco is a powerhouse in the endpoint area. And I think one of the biggest things that we talk about a lot in the Cisco space is that this is a single client. When we start talking about what happens at the endpoint layer, we have to do things like protecting the asset, right? We talk about EDR and endpoint protection and those kind of things. Cisco does that with secure endpoint. We talk about the identity inside that application. How are we making sure it's the right user on that device and that endpoint being used? We have to secure that. Well, obviously we have Cisco Duo. We have to simplify that experience. The user doesn't want to think about VPNs anymore. They just want to open their laptop and be able to get to the resources that they need. And we really empower that through what we've done with Umbrella and Secure Access. And lastly, there's a ton of telemetry data we can get. But more beyond that, and this is a use case we talk about all the time, is when somebody's at home or working somewhere and they have a choppy video experience, or the audio is a little garbled, and they're like, I had this problem, and it's the network's fault, right? Well, really, you were 300 meters away from your wireless access point, or your kids were home and they were playing video games and eating up your bandwidth. And it's not always a network problem, but with more telemetry, we can troubleshoot root cause a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. And we get that kind of visibility through Thousand Eyes and the agents we put on these desktops. But again, all of this isn't a bunch of fragmented clients. And I think that's one of the things that we fight all the time at the endpoint layer is we hear, oh, we have to put another agent on our desktops. Oh, what does that do from competing resources? And now we have to manage something else. And this is really where the power of our secure client comes into play. We all know and love the AnyConnect client from the past, but it's morphed and transformed with Cisco and evolved with Cisco over the years. And we now have a single secure client that can do everything in a single install. And before you go, oh, well, I don't want all this bloatware on my PC and everything else. That's not what happens with secure client. We can turn these modules on and off during the install or on demand as we need them. So the real power of this is I'm doing a single install and turning on the features that I need and I'm going to use within my environment. But at the end of the day, it is a single client that we're leveraging. I think there's a lot of power to that message, and I really want to transform the messaging. When you think of endpoint, you think of Cisco, because we do all these great things within a single platform that enables you not only to help you troubleshoot, but provide a better, more seamless experience to your end users. So, hey, we left the endpoint. Cool. The endpoint's protected. We got the identity. Now it leaves the endpoint and that packet's going somewhere. Well, it's got to traverse a network somewhere. And this is where you do think of Cisco, right? When you think of network, immediately Cisco comes top of mind in a lot of places, and it is the true powerhouse. What I find very interesting, and I start at the journey here on the wireless side, because 80% of all traffic is Wi-Fi based today. We've seen the tipping scale of wired and wireless, and wireless has become the predominant connectivity means. I bring this up in a lot of conversations I have with clients when we're in a conference room and everybody's got their laptop and their tablet out. I'm like, think of all the devices that are sitting here. None of it's wired, and we expect it to work. I'm calling that Starbucks syndrome, right? The idea that I walk into a place and I have really good wireless connectivity that's easy to use and easy to consume, and it's just an expectation. And that is really our primary means of connectivity at the end user level from a consumer base. And I love putting out these kind of buzzwords, I'll say, that we talk about all the time in the wireless and some of the cool things we're doing. And I'm not going to steal thunder because Jamie Pugh did a great presentation on tap last time that you can go watch to the link Josh referenced. But things like our AI powered radio resource management. We would talk a lot about WPA3 and how that's our new secure mean of connectivity. But even beyond that, we're starting talking about LoRaWAN, which is for IoT environments, doing long haul wireless connectivity in a better means than our typical Wi-Fi, or even private 5G has become more and more of a talk track in organizations. And how do I leverage that? So we see this explosion of wireless. And I have a cool slide if you want to reach out to me, but it shows you kind of that trajectory over the years and how fast wireless has grown. And it's kind of wild to think that wireless used to be like a nice to have, and now it's a production critical application. And that switch happened somewhere along the lines, and I feel like IT didn't keep up with that, right? We still view a wireless as almost like we hope it works. We don't invest a lot of time and energy into it, but we really need to focus on this because it is a predominant means of connectivity in the world today. So once we get on any kind of wireless, it lands on an access point, which is still connected to a wire. So we still talk about the LAN. And you know, I was joking with Josh the other day, and he said a switch is a switch, and as long as the switches we're good, right? And I'm like, that's a really good thought process. But there's so much more power in switches, right? And that's what we need to focus on. And it is a really crucial part of the intelligence inside of a network. So when we start talking about things like segmentation and we're coining the phrase smart switches in our new portfolio and stack. We have to get as close to the edge with intelligence than ever before. And we start talking anything about like edge routing down to the access layer. There's a lot of focus to that LAN closer to the endpoint, because that's where the data is. That's where security really wants to live, because it is the most crucial area to protect in an organization. And then, of course, once it leaves the LAN, it goes into a WAN somewhere. And this is really where the new edge is, right? We used to have brick and mortar shops, and everything was, hey, I left the building, and that's my edge. Well, the edge is kind of everywhere, but as soon as it leaves our protected environment, that kind of LAN edge, we go into the WAN. That's really where we need to focus on our security, our visibility, and truly the aggregation and resiliency of the environment. So we talk a lot about SASE and SSE in today's world, SD-WAN, even the firewalls and how they're being encompassed and incorporated into a lot of these aspects. And then, of course, we added in cloud networking. And this is probably the biggest area that's grown. And again, I think it's grown a little bit too fast. We hear a lot of hiccups in the cloud networking space. It's done very differently. It's a different modality than we're used to working with, but it's got to be incorporated in your overall strategy. How I always viewed cloud networking is it's just another node on our fabric. And we have to envision that and really focus on our architecture in that sense. So we're talking about like SCCI, software-defined cloud interconnects, and the ability to extend our edge, our WAN edge, into cloud and make it just part of our overall network architecture is more important now than ever. So with all of this, I'm kind of talking about networking by need. This is a little bit of an eye chart, and I don't want to go through this step by step. But the idea here is we've really changed networking from somebody sitting on a desktop inside your brick and mortar, and that's what we have to protect, to really driving networking to a need-based topology. So is it a remote employee? Is it a remote contractor? Is it an on-prem contractor, on-prem employee? We have to morph the network to use and look at all these different personas, but still go through the same security process, same steps, but we're still collecting telemetry data and really good data points throughout this whole process. So there's a lot of complexity that goes into this. This is just a snapshot of the amount of personas. There's probably 50 to 100 personas in most organizations that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. but to understand them and really architect to them are all kind of unique in their own sense. And of course, networking is our lifeblood at Cisco. So when you're looking at this, I've tried to simplify this as much as possible. We talk about the future-proof wireless. We're playing in the LoRaWAN, we're playing in private 5G, we're writing and standardizing the Wi-Fi 7 standards. Cisco is leading the charge in developing these new network standards, and I think that is crucial to what differentiates us in this marketplace. We're not just implementing a technology, we're writing a technology, and that is a really powerful statement. Again, the whole kind of coining of the smart switches and where we're going with that standard, secure routers, secure firewalls. Again, Jamie Pugh did a phenomenal job on his TAP session going through a lot of these announcements at Cisco Live. That's really redefining and re-innovating Cisco, and that's what I'm really excited about. Cisco has really come out swinging hard with a lot of this innovation, and we're getting back to our core identity, and that just means the world to me. That's what I grew up on, and that's what I'm really excited about. But we talk about security, obviously, across this whole stack. So, if you heard about post-quantum security, if you heard about our bringing together our cloud and on-prem management platforms, native integrations and extensions into that, into our other stack, as well as AI-powered or AI Canvas and AI assistant solutions. So everything's really coming together in a simplified story for Cisco, which is a great time to be here. So networking is, I can't stress enough how important this is and how innovative this space has become. And a switch just isn't a switch anymore, right? It is doing so much more than that in today's world. So we left the network. Where do we land? We land somewhere in a data center, right? We got across the WAN, the LAN, the whole environment, and we land somewhere. That somewhere isn't as specific as it used to be. So when we talk about data center, I used to think of the rows, the racks, the powers, three-phase PDUs that were powering everything, and I knew exactly what I was talking about when I said data center. But when we say data center today, I'm kind of redefining it. Put simply, it's where you host your application. This could be on your property, in a colo, in a public cloud, in a private cloud, SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, all of those things really is where the data center lives, because that's where your application lives. And that's what we're kind of morphing and changing. But as always, there's complexity, and the challenge here is consistency. So we need to really think about how we're doing data centers, providing connectivity options between those. We talk a lot about DCI, the data center interconnect, and how that's morphed over the years. And it used to be point-to-points and MPLS and like those kind of technologies. Now we talk about cloud on-ramping and using things like a Megaport solution set to really scale my needs of my data center interconnects, because they're all over the place, and getting the best almost SLA-like feel to our connectivities as we can possibly get. And that's a lot of architecture and a lot of forethought that has to go into it. We have to maintain the same security posture. That becomes a much bigger challenge when you're consuming multi-cloud, Azure, AWS. I'm trying to create that same security posture and feel across that whole environment. That's a huge gap in a lot of people's portfolio today as we walk in and architect these solutions. Gathering telemetry and data about performance, right? Again, we're talking about experiences here and that destination blindness. People don't care that it's going into a data center that lives somewhere else that you don't control and have any means about. They expect you to know what's happening and making sure it's a good experience. And the only way to do that is making sure you have telemetry and data about what's going on inside that environment. And of course, scaling. This is where this consistency gets broken down all the time, is that the business feels like, oh, I can scale faster if I do a SaaS or a PaaS or some other offering. I can't wait for IT to build this out, so I'm going to go swipe a credit card somewhere and get my service tomorrow. Well, if we architect our data centers to be scalable, then we don't have that, kind of shadow IT that we've dealt with over the past years, and we have to get up to that standard. So Cisco is redefining this kind of message. And if you've heard of our, ACI environments of data center fabric and NXOS and Hyperfabric, and we're really unifying this message under the new Nexus dashboard. I'm really excited about this because this gives us a lot of flexibility with the same control plane. So whether that be ACI or building out your VXLAN topologies, or just building out even campus fabrics that you want to be managed in a central pane, Nexus dashboard is now becoming this unified platform. And again, a lot of these announcements that happen in Cisco Live are available today or in the very near term. So this is a very exciting topic to talk about. If you haven't done a Nexus dashboard overview with anybody from the Cisco team, I highly encourage you to reach out to somebody and get a deeper dive on this. This hits a lot of the bullet points we're talking about here, whether it be the analytics we're talking about, automation and workflowing, troubleshooting, But these are things that are very important to that overall experience. And now Cisco has a unified control plane that does all of that. So that's really exciting. And of course, our fabric continues to expand. When I started, 20 years ago in IT, which is hard to say, it's not fun to say 20 years I've been doing this, some days, but the idea of like 100 meg back then was a big pipe. Now we're releasing switches that are 800 gig. That the factors and Moore's law and everything that goes into it just kind of blows your mind a little bit. But this is a reality that we live in. Like, we are positioning 400 gig switches actively. 100 gigs kind of the new standard for server connectivity. We are doing this over multi-mode fibers with a single LC connection, like mind-blowing technologies that we couldn't have fathomed 15, 20 years ago are just the norm. We're taking a two-pair LC connector and plugging in, and here's 100 gig, here's 400 gig. Like, that's amazing. I'm so excited about where we're headed with a lot of these technologies, and it's just getting easier and easier to consume. But Cisco is obviously leading the charge with these fabrics, and we're building these ASICs out to be specific for these workloads. So, again, just exciting time. If you can't tell, I'm a little passionate about this, but really cool stuff coming. So we made it through the data center fabric. It's got to land somewhere, right? It's going to land on a server. It's going to land on some kind of compute platform. And compute, in my mind, is making a comeback. It became kind of like this commodity. Who cares? Intel x86 platform, whatever, just throw something at the wall. But I think when we start walking through the workloads that are available today, it's redefining what compute means. Bare metal used to be like, oh, you have bare metal workloads in your environment? I'm 99% virtualized. And, like, it was almost like a bragging right to be like, how virtualized are you? And bare metal was like this poo-poo kind of thing off to the side. I think bare metal is actually kind of coming back. And this is just my opinion, right? So I'm not putting the Cisco logo on this opinion, but Zach Miller's opinion is we're making a comeback here. We have a lot of dedicated appliances. We're seeing some of these workloads scale so large that it doesn't make sense to put on its own virtual blade. And I want to have a dedicated appliance for it. We see a lot of integrations with our storage appliance vendors like Cohesity and Vast and Veeam. They want a dedicated box to run this on, because that's either how critical it is or how resource consuming it is. And of course, we see this trend of core licensing. So when you start talking about like Oracle, VMware, even Microsoft, sometimes it's easier just to take that SQL box or that Oracle database and put it on a bare metal platform and control the licensing than worry about the complexities of putting it in a virtual platform and being like, are they going to consume all my cores, and how do I mask my cores for my licensing? So bare metal really still has its place in the data center today. And of course, we have the champion of all, which is the virtual environments, our VSIs, our VDIs. We're starting to see the uptick of containerization. I think the enterprise has really scaled to containerization. I think our market, kind of that mid-market area, is starting to consume it more and more. But we still see a ton of VSI and VDI out in our environments. And of course, the hypervisors of the world, right? We talked plenty about the VMware and where we sit on that today. But Hyper-V and some of those components coming out, and of course, Acropolis with Nutanix. But we still have those out there that are like Proxmoxes of the world and Verge IOs. So this is not slowing down. I think the hypervisors of the world are probably going to speed up over the next couple of years as well to get some competitive shakeup in the industry. But Cisco, again, at the end of the day, we're providing the compute platform for all of this, and we're playing in this sandbox. Cloud workloads is that new modality, right? That is always shifting and adds a layer of complexity because it's not like anything we've done before. When you start talking things like platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, it's a layer of abstraction that we're not used to in this space. But at the end of the day, it still has the same things that we need to do inside of our other workloads, whether it be monitoring, security, compliance, patching, those kind of things. So that all still plays a role. And of course, now the very big, talk is AI ML workloads. And this is very different than everything else we've talked about in the past. Extremely high throughputs. If you've heard the term Rocky V2, which is RDMA over Converged Ethernet version 2, is really about just exposing our PCI bus outside of the environment, allowing us to create like GPU grids to run AI workloads. And Cisco's empowering that not only through our compute modes, but obviously our networking as well. As you saw the 800 gig that we talked about last time, that's really powering this kind of AI workload and what we call AI pods inside our environment. But it's completely separate and is so different than everything we've done before. And that's why, again, I think that goes back to bare metal. I don't think you're going to put a bunch of AI/ML workloads inside of a virtual machine and expect it to run really smoothly. You're going to put some dedicated appliances, dedicated hardware to that platform, and say, let's go. So, compute's really exciting, big comeback. And of course, Cisco's here for it, right? I was an M1 user of UCS 5108 back in the day, again, 15 years ago. I really love the platform. I'm really, really big onto it just because of how the management runs. Coming from more of that network-centric background, it made a lot of sense to me on how this was run and the ability for the service profiles and everything. And we just doubled down in that space with inter-site adoptions, but also our release of these new lines of devices. Obviously, we follow the kind of the Intel curve, but we've also now expanded to AMD platforms. We know that AMD has some core components to it, pun intended there, that kind of excel it. But we play in the AMD space, we play in the Intel space, we play in the chassis space, we play in the pizza box servers. We also have specialized servers for like high dense GPU farms and whatnot as well. And one of the big shout outs here and something that I've always loved about UCS is it's completely customizable. I'm not going to come in as an SE to you and say, here's your small, medium, and large, have a good day. That's all you can buy from me. Like, that's not how Cisco works. We come in and we model this out with you. We pick the right procs that meet your licensing need, that meet your performance need, the right RAMs, and how do we populate them. Like, it's a deeper dive conversation. And I think that's what's been missing in some of these larger mainstream server providers, is that they're just like, here's your 3 options, tell us what you want. We're here to actually architect and design alongside you because we understand how important that is to a successful environment. So inside the compute platform, we're jumping into the actual application, right? And it's kind of like, whoa, we made it there finally. Cool, right? Kind of wrong. We made it to the server that's running it and the application that's running on that server. But then we all know what happens. And this is probably the biggest complexity of it all, is that server that we hit, most likely like a web front end or something like that, now has to go out and authenticate you. It's got to talk to a backend database server. It's got to talk to its application servers. And that one life of a packet now turned into a multifamily life of a packet, because now all these things have dependencies and waiting for that to come back to respond to your initial request. This is a lot of layers of complexity. And I think this is probably our biggest gap I see when I walk into an environment, is understanding this dependency tree and the spider web of things that happen inside of an application or an environment. And people don't think of Cisco when they think of this, right? They think of other vendors, but Cisco plays really well in this space. We are really great at organizing the chaos. If you haven't heard of a product called Secure Workload, it used to be called Tetration. It's now an agent-based install. We don't need to buy a 42U rack mount server of $1 billion worth of gear. This can be consumed very simply, and by putting an agent right on that server or that compute platform, and now we can actually say at the process level who's talking to what, and we can help you visualize this. This is one of the biggest values. I mean, secure workload in itself, just being able to decouple the complexity is phenomenal walking in the door. Then there's other layers of it, of course, of like actual microsegmentation in the data center that every security team wants to scream at us about. And how do I make this magic button? It's not that simple, but if you get the visibility and at least understand the map, you can actually start having that discussion. But you have to start there. Yeah, go ahead.
What would your advice be for people who feel like we might need this, but this just seems way too complicated. I don't think that I could get there.
Yeah, I think, there was a funny joke somebody said when I'm doing this kind of talk track. They're like, I came in to buy a car and you're selling me the dealership. And
Yep.
they kind of came at me with that, and I'm like, listen, I'm not selling you the dealership. I'm telling you already own a lot of cars in the dealership. I'm just trying to tell you how to make that actually all work. And when we start talking about the complexities of this, it is not hard to implement this. And to your point, Eric, if somebody wants to start small, maybe put it on their critical apps, maybe put it on their like Active Directory servers and start there and start mapping it out, or their main critical applications. We don't have to shotgun this and put it on every workload in your environment. But understanding your critical apps is so important that we can put this on as little as 50 servers, 100 servers in your environment, and we can get a really good picture of what's going on that maybe you don't understand at all what's happening today. And even through those pilots or discovery sessions we can do, a lot of times we find out, hey, why is that talking to that? Why should this actually be talking to that? Why are my end users able to directly communicate with this server? They shouldn't be able to. And we really start getting a true understanding of that environment. And again, I don't think people think of Cisco when they think of organizing the chaos at the application layer, but we have grown and evolved over the years. And things like application dynamics now as part of our portfolio, we can get even deeper into that level of knowledge. So we start crawl, walk, run, right? And that's how I will always talk about application APMs and everything in that space. We got to get a base layer of visibility. Then we start building on top of that. If we want to get down to the code level, we can even get down to the code level and show you, hey, this SQL select star command is what's killing your application, your experience. We can get to that level of granularity within the Cisco portfolio. And I don't think a lot of people understand that that's how deep and granular we get in today's world. Does that help, Eric?
Absolutely. I just know
Awesome.
that a lot of times people think about labor cost, and maybe they're even trying to beat implementation debt. They're trying to find out like, hey, how do I invest my labor cost to like reach this infrastructure? And there are all these cool shiny toys out there, but they may think like, oh, well, my business doesn't need that, and because of just how much work there is to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And these, especially the secure workload stand-ups are not weeks and weeks of effort, right? It's weeks and weeks to get to microsegmentation and security and all that stuff. I'm not going to downplay that level of effort, but to get the visibility is very simple and quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a security perspective, one of the best things you can do is just turn on the lights. And to the point Zach made, maybe you've recently implemented LDAP-S instead of standard LDAP. This is a great way to validate that. Understanding the protocols, if they're speaking plain text and they shouldn't be. From a security perspective, just turning those lights on gives you the ability to know something doesn't smell right. And then from there, you can chase what you need to.
Yeah, that's a great point. So hey, we made it to the application. We got the request. Now we got to do the same thing in reverse. I think that's kind of mind-boggling to people that maybe aren't as technical. Like when we're talking to leaders and everything, we're talking through this talk track, and they're like, "Okay, it took all of that. You're talking about all these hops, these different points, these different connectivity modalities, and then we have to take that request, answer it, and return it back the whole way. And this is all happening all day, every day." And I think that's something that I always want to put into perspective. So when we're talking about this, we're doing this round trip in milliseconds, millions of times per day per application. I think that's something that we abstract from and we don't think about, but we're doing this. And I think that's really cool. Like, I'm really passionate about it. I'm really excited. I want to do a huge shout out to all the IT people in the world for making this magical machine operate, because that is truly a feat that people can't fathom. And the crazy thing, and this is why I don't want to be a CISO in my world, but my brother-in-law is, and I feel bad for him every day. Is every packet needs to be inspected for security, right? We're talking about millions of times per day per application in milliseconds, and we know it only takes one. We can't undermine the importance of security in everything we do. A lot of times we feel security becomes a boundary or a barrier, and they slow our process down, but most of the time it's rightfully so. And I think we got to take a step back some days and really think about their life and how important this is and what they're dealing with. When you're talking about billions of events to go through and find the needle in the haystack, it's a large task, and we all need to be a partner in that process. And Cisco obviously is doubling down on that security initiative and making sure it's an integrated part of our story.
Uh,
And
on that note, I just want to on the inspected part for every packet needs to be inspected. It doesn't necessarily mean decrypted. And we would love that. But I don't think anybody wants to be in the business of decrypting their entire network at all times. And I don't think anybody wants to build a data center to support that. But there are smarter ways to do that. And like we have a few of them here at Cisco is our encrypted visibility engine, which is able to look at that hello packet, identify it, and cross-reference that through security intelligence, which is managed by Talos. And then in addition to that, they've also evolved Snort to be able to use machine learning, where if they're not able to look at that packet, but they see that it looks like a SQL injection, they're able to block it. And they might hit some false positives, but it only takes one packet, like as Zach stated. So really think about that. Like, what am I doing from the encrypted traffic and decrypted traffic?
no, it's a great call, Eric. And I think it is one of the coolest technologies I've seen in a long time is the encrypted visibility engine. and the ability to kind of like fingerprint traffic. And we see attacks have very specific traffic signatures to them, and we can detect an attack without ever decrypting a packet. Like that is hugely valuable in organizations, and to your point, can catch that needle in the haystack that maybe did get passed. Maybe it's an advanced persistent threat. And we don't know about it, but we see that signature, and now we can identify where we weren't before. So great call out. And then, of course, I always ask, how many different products are we to make this happen? I was talking to my manager Ron the other day, and we're talking about the power of the platform. We talk a lot about the power of the platform, and I do think we're seeing that era of the platform come into play. We had the long era of best of breed. Everybody went to the Gartner Magic Quadrant upper right corner. I'm buying that product because it was rated the highest, and that is just so much fatigue in not only IT staffs and admins, but we actually saw increase in attacks getting through because they're not talking to each other. They're not integrated. And when we take a step back and say, how about that 80-20 rule? Does this have 80% of the bells and whistles, and does it do the job? And the 20% of the bells and whistles, maybe I don't even use or need, but it has a much more integrative story to it. That's where Cisco lives. I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're the best of breed in every product that I mentioned on this call today, because I'm not going to lie to you. But I will tell you, I think we have the most integrative story in all of this life of a packet that we see in the ecosystem today. So I always take a step back and be like, are all our products talking together? What are the reliances, dependencies that happen there? And through this whole journey that we're doing all the time, do we want that layer of complexity of having to make all these crosstalk and integrate? That's a challenge. So great, we made it. We did all these magical things, hopefully in milliseconds. If it didn't take milliseconds, we probably had a bad experience. So that's what I always ask is we make all these magical things work, but the experience is all that matters, right? And that's really what even us as consumers of our own technologies, if I open up my app on my phone and it doesn't work, I get a little cranky. I don't sit there and be like, oh, maybe that firewall guy's having a rough day today. That's not the first thing that goes through my mind. It's like, what the heck's going on with Facebook? They're a huge organization. How can my packet take this long to get there? Why does my post load? So the age-old question is, what does good look like? And I love this cartoon. I showed this to Josh yesterday. But if you haven't seen this old cartoon, it's from like 1970s. So this has been the problem we've always worked with in the world of end users and just humanity in general. What did the architect design? What purchasing ordered? What engineering drew up? What production actually built? What the contractor installed? And what the customer actually wanted, right? Knowing the outcome and the expectation of our users are so crucial and important because we can do all the amazing whiz-bang technology things in the world, but if it takes 3 seconds to hit a button, they're going to be like, this was a horrible experience. I don't want to use this technology ever again, right? So we need to understand what the outcome is of that end user and what good looks like to even start a baseline and understanding that. And with that, we have all the data points. We think of that journey that we just walked through with the life of the packet. Every step of the way, we were collecting data, we were collecting telemetry, but we never really started putting that together. We've always struggled with that. We've had, oh, well, this interface has this bandwidth. We have maybe the SD-WAN has some telemetry data, but holistically, I've never walked into a client that's like, I can show you what my client experience is right now. And I think that's something that we need to strive for as IT people, because that is all that matters, is what was that experience. And I think this also put a light bulb off in my head of why Cisco acquired Splunk, right? Cisco is collecting so much data about everything going on in the environment, whether that be internet-based. We're one of the major providers, obviously, in the ISP space, but also inside most environments, they're using some kind of Cisco technology for that traversal of networking. But now we're also doing things in the application layer, inside the data center, inside of the compute. All of that data can come together, and Splunk is a data powerhouse engine for that. So we are incorporating that Splunk into everything we do. There's already a lot of native integrations before even at the acquisition. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. I'm really excited about this because I think this is going to help us as IT professionals really strive towards that experience and having the true data and the dashboarding to make it visible to us of what's going on in our environments. So really excited about it. I just want to put that out there because I think a lot of people are like, Cisco bought Splunk. Like, why? Well, here's why, right? We have all this data that we're ingesting. We're going to put it together and package it up and give you that dashboard to show you what your experience looks like. And that to me is really exciting. And of course, our integration doesn't stop there, right? I can't have a talk without mentioning our endpoints. I am super bullish about it. Within my first few months here, my manager sent me to New York City every other day to go and see these video endpoints. So I got to know them and love them deeply. But these things aren't just great video endpoints. They're also sensors on our network, right? And that's something that's really cool, is that we can use these to actually say, how was the experience in that room natively on that video endpoint? And that's something that nobody else can say, right? And that to me is a really cool standout feature. And of course, it's another data point in our overall customer experience journey. I'm bullish about contact center. My wife was a contact center supervisor, so it's kind of just lives in my household. But again, something that Cisco isn't probably like first thought of for is contact center. They're like, okay, you're a networking company. What the heck do you care about contact center? No, we have a phenomenal contact center product with a lot of really cool AI functionality, a lot of cool tech features. Contact center has really become more tech than ever before, and that's where we're shining. And if you haven't seen, Cisco Live had a phenomenal AI natural language agent experience inside a contact center. That was kind of mind blowing to even me. I was like, wow, they could interrupt the person and it would just react fine. Now, I don't know, it didn't respond to emotions very well yet. If I'm yelling at them, I want them to kind of yell at me back a little bit. But we'll probably get there as AI comes in the future. And of course, our integration doesn't just stop with Cisco. We wish you would buy everything Cisco. We know this is not the reality we live in. I'm a realist. But PX Grid and some of our integration platforms allow us to really openly integrate with a lot of other vendors in the marketplace. I think, a lot of times we walk in and we tell this great story and the customer's like, yeah, but I don't got budget to rip and replace, let alone resources to rip and replace everything. And that's not a realistic ask. So we know here at Cisco that we have to play in the sandbox. If we're going to do any kind of brownfield migrations or anything like that, we have to be having open standards. And again, Cisco is writing a lot of these frameworks, and we are authoring this with a lot of other partners in the space. So it's not like we're doing this in a silo and making this completely proprietary and saying, shove off, have a good day. Integration is the name of the game, and we're here for it, right? We want to play well in that partner ecosystem. So, in summary, y'all are rock stars. You keep this miracle machine running. I can't give you guys kudos enough. Everybody out there, everybody that I interface with, all my team, I have tremendous respect for anybody in the IT industry. This is not an easy thing. We talk about this. I think this is a great, talk track to have with your leadership and get them to understand what they're asking of you and putting it in simple terms of you got destination blindness. You're only thinking about the outcome. This is the journey it has to take and what I'm responsible for. A lot of times that puts it into light. We talk a lot about technical debt in places today and how it's a hard thing to get IT budget. And it's really because leadership in those higher levels don't understand what the ask is. So I encourage all of you to take this. You can get a copy of this presentation. Feel free to reach out to us, morph it in your own way, but have this conversation with your leadership, because educating them is where it starts to help you with your IT budget and your IT journey. Cisco can help in all parts of the journey. We're here for you. If you can't tell, we're a passionate group of individuals. We're here to help. We really want what's best for you as a customer. And sometimes that means not buying Cisco, and we're real about that. But we're here to make sure you're positioning with the right solution for the problem that you have. And as architects on the team, that is our sole job, right? Is to make sure that you are architected properly and you're getting the best value out of any solution you get. And at the end of the day, don't get blinded by the destination. Take a moment, understand the journey. I think there are so many layers of abstraction we deal with in a day-to-day basis today. It's really easy to forget about the journey. It's really easy to not understand the underpinnings. And we see a lot of younger generations coming out that are like, well, isn't it just a button you press? What happens when you press that button? I think we got to get back to understanding the core basics and understanding that underlayment, because if we get too far away and we get too many layers of abstraction, then we lose the realism of what we're dealing with. We lose the journey. And then when something breaks or when the experience isn't positive, it becomes much, much more challenging to really troubleshoot it and get to a root cause. So just take time, understand the journey, really understand that process, be inquisitive, ask the questions, and we'll all go far. So I just want to say thank you for the time. I don't know, Eric, Josh, if there's any questions or anything you guys would like to add to the conversation, but I really appreciate you guys offering me the time to talk to you. If you can't tell, I get excited about this kind of stuff and always happy to talk about it.
I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us, Zach. It's been great. I love working with you. Um, it's been fantastic. I know one of the reasons why, like you kind of mentioned the idea of Cisco kind of getting back to its core. I felt that way when I was going through a SASE migration, and that's when I was like, yeah, I'm ready to go. If it's ever going to be now, I'm going to go to Cisco now, and that's when I started going through it because I started to really believe in what we were doing, and it seemed like we were actually addressing what the enterprise needed. And I was like, I was like one of these guys where you're wearing like 5 or 6 different hats. I mean, 800 gig is fantastic, but it's not for everybody. I need a more simple way to, manage the entire network. And I think that you have such a great vision on this, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, to your point of getting back to the basics and getting back to our core identities, I think what's always surprised me about Cisco is that they do listen to their customers, right? Customer feedback is crucial. We take it to heart. We're all very passionate. We all want to excel. So when you bring up ideas to us, in the field especially, we will take those ideas back. And that's what I've always loved about Cisco. And when I worked with Cisco in the past, is they were always open to opinions. They were always open to, well, how would you expect that to work? And customer experience is kind of in our lifeblood, So I think that's a big thing for us.
I absolutely echo all of that, and especially thank you to Zach for putting this presentation together and walking us through it today. Just again, I know we talked about it at the top of the call. If you joined a little bit late, you can catch the beginning part of the recording or any of our previous recordings on metrophillyselect.com. Just scan the QR code here. And please be on the lookout for an invitation on our next session, September 26th with Tim Glenn. We're going to dive into more of how Cisco thinks about security, how you can infuse security into the network, and areas where AI intersects with security. So be on the lookout for that. We'll have the agenda out to the team here in the next couple weeks.
And just real quick, Zach, I thought a phenomenal job. And being here for so long, you forget how big our portfolio is and all the different areas of the network we touch. And I really liked your point about the power of the platform, because we do speak about that a lot. And it does feel like Cisco's getting to the point where we do recognize how big the portfolio, and we are trying to bring it all together to make that experience so much easier for our customers. And I think you did a really good job of highlighting that today. So
Thanks,
well
Rob.
done. Yeah, really good.
Awesome. Well, thanks.